Alright, here we go. The video that gets me crucified. I am terrified. Excited, but terrified. It's the Halo campaigns tier list. And by the way, campaigns, not the Halo games tier list, right? This has nothing to do with the multiplayers, and there's a few reasons for that. And there's a few reasons why I think, in general, ranking the Halo games overall is slightly unfair. And it does actually have something to do with ODST, which it will be interesting once you realise how I feel about ODST. In that they don't all represent the same type of product, almost, really. Halo 3, well, ODST doesn't have a PvP multiplayer. It does have a PvE multiplayer element, it does have a multiplayer, but it's a slightly different product, I think. There's also the fact that I just feel very differently about some multiplayers compared to their campaigns. Some are objectively worse than the campaigns, sometimes it's the other way around. You know, for example, Halo Infinite, the campaign is in a much better place than the multiplayer. I mean, you still have that very solid gameplay foundation, but, you know, there's no denying that the campaign is complete and the multiplayer isn't. And that's sort of why I would just find trying to do that ranking very confusing, and it would end up being not necessarily dishonest, because I wouldn't be lying, but it still wouldn't feel very true, because it's not, you're not ranking something that is pure and standalone. But at the same time, when ranking the campaigns, I am talking about story and level design, and this will come into play in with a few of them, actually all of them in some way, obviously, but for some it will be more, there'll be a greater difference between the the story and the level design, and even like the narrative / level structure, like the structure of the game. You know, Halo Infinite obviously and ODST both have fairly non-traditional like game structures. You don't just go through level by level. I mean, that's definitely the case for Infinite, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, I mean, this is the second dedicated Halo video on the channel, and yeah, like I said, it might get me crucified because my opinions, well, I'm not a Bungie. You know, I don't ride or die with Bungie. I don't play Destiny. I also don't ride or die with the Bungie era. I do in general. I generally prefer the Bungie era of Halo more to the current one, but I'm also not a 343 hater. I'm also not a 343 apologist, however. I think, you know, they need a little spanking, I think, to get in. You know, they kind of need to be put in their place a little bit. I do feel that way, certainly, but I don't hate them. I don't think everything that's happened to Halo is entirely their fault, and I do think they've done good things. They certainly have, and there's no denying. You're kind of just wrong if you deny that they haven't done anything good that Bungie didn't do, you know. And this is just the Halo FPS titles as well. The main, it's not really the main series, I suppose, but to me, you know, you have multiple other Halo games, but to me, even though you have spin-offs in the FPS sort of side of things, there's no mainline games for Halo that aren't FPSs, and to me it's always felt right to group them together, especially for me, and you'll see why with my opinions on the two spin-offs / prequels. You know, Reach was actually my introduction to the series. I wouldn't even think about leaving it out of a discussion like this, and also they were developed by the main developers of Halo, unlike Wars or the Spartan games, you know. So that's also the difference there. So, I mean, let's not waste any more time. I suppose just get straight into this. I'm still very scared, because we're actually starting with the one that will probably get me the most shit, only because I'm not putting it in S. And now, don't worry, Halo 2, that's what we're starting with. Halo 2 is a fantastic video game. It's a masterpiece in a lot of ways. It really did a lot for the it did a lot for shooters. It did a lot for video game storytelling in general. It showed that you could really take this cinematic approach to storytelling, and its story is absolutely magnificent. But in my opinion, ever so slightly overrated. Overrated only because I find its structure slightly not confusing, but, and I guess then disorienting wouldn't be the right word either. But its structure irks me somewhat. It feels slightly unnatural that you've literally you're about halfway through the chief side of things, and then you sort of like you you play the first missions as the Arbiter after Chief has gone through the portal to Delta Halo. And, you know, that's obviously very contextual. You need to understand the game to understand what I'm talking about. But if you do understand what I'm talking about, you might agree with me that it's very odd that really the Arbiter being the main protagonist of the game, you really only step into his shoes, like about a third of the way into the story, chronologically at least. It's very odd to me. But at the same time, the story is fantastic, and it does have a lot to do with Arbiter being this a true protagonist, unlike Chief, who is obviously the protagonist and has a well-defined character, but he's a very rigid character, and that means there's not a lot to latch onto. He's very much so a vessel for the player, Chief is, but he becomes a vessel for the player due to his character. It doesn't feel forced. It still feels like that's the type of person he is, just very, very reserved, very cold. And that's just how it is. But Arbiter is obviously a much more fleshed out character, and he really does elevate Halo 2's story. So on a story level, just when you lay it out, that's an S tier story. Although I do find the pacing of it, I don't quite like the pacing. But I do love the story though. I mean, tonally it's really magnificent, and it just presents some really cool ideas, and it's probably got some of the best character work in the series, arguably the best. Not for me though, not for me personally, but I recognise what Halo 2 is from a story perspective. I feel like I'm probably going to catch less heat actually for my opinions on the actual gameplay, because as I think any Halo fan knows, Halo 2 is not balanced, right? It's barely even balanced for heroic difficulty, and we know it wasn't balanced for legendary difficulty. They didn't have the time. They just cranked the numbers up because they were crunching. So they just cranked the numbers up to make enemies more lethal, make you weaker, and it just turned out to be this. That's why it's one of the hardest games of all time. That's why it's the hardest Halo game, certainly. And that's definitely something that I'm not using against it in the sense of, I'm criticising Bungie. It's more critical of the game than of Bungie. The legendary difficulty is so unbalanced. Bungie still did a fantastic job with the game as a whole. At the same time, I think when it comes to level design, it's I wouldn't say the weakest of the Bungie games actually, and that's going to get me a lot of shit. But because I do like a lot of Halo 2's levels, but you know, it's not the type of it doesn't perfect level design in the way that Halo 3 does, and we'll get to that. Halo 2's level design, it does slightly drag sometimes, especially those Arbiter missions where you're just in Forerunner structures all the time. For me, they do drag a little bit, but at the same time, you've got a lot of different enemies to fight in Halo 2, and I like the fact that you have the brutes that work so differently from the elites in this game, whereas in like 3 and ODST, the brutes are just the elites, but without regenerating shields. In Halo 2, they work very differently, and you're only introduced to them halfway through the game. At the same time, I find enemies like the brutes and like the Flood to just sort of be much less interesting to fight in this than they are in any of the other games. I think the brutes are just, they don't react naturally. You unload bullets into they're the most naked members of the Covenant, and you unload bullets into them, and it feels like they're just staring at you, like you hit them with that, you know, dollar store pepper spray or something. It's just not very it doesn't feel very natural, and I suppose that's just a part of the difficulty of the game being the way that it is. And it also has, like, I think Chris Ragon can corroborate this. I think this is where I got this sort of idea from. He says that the first mission, Cairo Station, the first playable mission, is actually the hardest in the game, which I'm not sure I agree with. I actually tend to get through Cairo Station fairly easily, but maybe that's the difference between heroic and legendary. He was attempting it was the most critical bounty to do Halo 2 legendary, no deaths, and congratulations to Javelin for doing that. That was history. That was fucking awesome. But yeah, I mean, but one thing, a very big positive I will give Halo 2, a couple of big positives I'll give Halo 2 when it comes to level design, is sort of the I don't know if it's actually correct to say environmental storytelling in this place in this case, but there's a lot of story that goes on while you're in the levels, which actually, when I think about it, I think perhaps some of the other games actually do a little bit better. At the same time, like I think it is the High Charity mission. It's either High Charity or Gravemind. I think it is High Charity because it's after the Flood have boarded High Charity, and you sort of hear the Prophet of Truth talking about, you know, how they're leaving, and that, you know, the noble Prophet of Mercy is with me, but actually Prophet of Mercy has just been infected by the Flood. It's like things like that that go on a lot throughout the game. It really helps the world feel more real, like there's things going on, and it doesn't feel like the world's just paused while you're playing. It feels like there's more going on than just in the cutscenes. And I also think that Halo 2 has probably some of the best vehicle sections. And I say this because I think it has the most challenging vehicle sections across all the games. And in this sense, I actually think it's a good way. I think, you know, the final mission, The Great Journey, the Banshee segment, I tend to have a lot of trouble with, but I actually find it very satisfying a lot of the time. I think, yeah, Halo 2 has got quite challenging vehicle segments. I mean, it's the hardest game in the series. But I think its vehicle segments are a lot of fun, especially that one on the bridge in New Mombasa. That is more of a power trip, actually. That's not difficult at all. And then when you're sort of speeding through the tunnels in New Mombasa, when there's the shadows, the the Covenant vehicle carriers, I think that stuff's all really cool. I really like. Yeah, Halo 2 is great. It's just not it's not it for me, I think is the best way to put it. But I still love a lot of aspects of it. I understand how amazing the story is. I think the level design and the tone in the missions is at times pretty spectacular. I just think perhaps its difficulty shines through in a way that doesn't feel particularly natural. I find myself hitting a brick wall whenever I play Halo 2, and I don't even get any better. Like my most recent playthrough, I actually dropped it down from heroic to normal, and I still had a hard time. Maybe it's just me being shit. But something about Halo 2's difficulty that feels slightly inaccessible, and I do feel like the level design drags at times when you're sort of stuck in these quite claustrophobic spaces and these sort of Forerunner facilities. And it happens a bit on High Charity for me as well. But in general, you know, it's a fantastic game. I'm not going to deny it. But in my heart, it's not a masterpiece, even though a lot of people would say that it is. And it might be objectively, but in my heart, like my tastes tell me it's not a masterpiece. It's just a great game. That's all. But, you know, I spent a lot of time on Halo 2, and I could easily spend this much time on all of them, if not more. So I sort of had to force myself. But Halo CE, Halo Combat Evolved, the very first, and thus the most aged. Now, this is another opinion that might catch me some flack. I think my opinion on really the only one that's not going to really do any damage is probably Halo 3. As in, I think I'm probably going to be on, you know, most people's side with that one. But CE, yeah, I don't agree with the Actman on this one. For me, CE has aged fairly poorly, actually. I think it gets a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, you can't deny its influence on the first-person shooter genre, certainly. And it, you know, it sort of laid the groundwork for, you know, cinematic storytelling in video games. That, you know, Halo 2 really showed that that was a thing that you could do. But CE sort of took some risks, especially with the Guilty Spark mission, where you start off you don't start actually about halfway through when you find the dead Marine, and you play the footage back through your helmet. It's actually, that's just a really cool you know, camera work, which I think that's a term that you can use in relation to video games. You know, cutscenes do have camera work, they have cinematography and framing and lighting. It is there. So, you know, CE pioneered a lot of stuff that we see nowadays in shooters, and that is sort of what Halo became to be as well. But for me, I find it, in general, I find it very claustrophobic, even when you're out in the open. I really feel like I'm just rooted to this ring, and it feels very small. And I think that's what they were going for. But it doesn't... I don't like it all the time. I think I've come to like CE a little bit more over time, actually. But I do think it has aged. It's not an ageless game. I think Halo 2 is a little bit more ageless. I think Halo 2 feels like a game that could be made today, despite its issues. I don't think its issues are necessarily a product of the time. I think CE's are, though. But it's actually the biggest credit I will give CE, actually, is that it doesn't feel janky, you know. at all, to me at least. Obviously, you don't have certain things like vehicle boarding, but you know. Oh, sorry. Hold on. No, CE is janky. The vehicles are very, very janky. But what I mean, CE got a lot of things right. I mean, I think sound design comes to mind immediately. Like, the way the assault rifle feels, like it feels fantastic. It was amazing to use. That thing feels it's so beefy, and it's like you get 660 rounds total on a full assault rifle. That's amazing. I love that. I think sandbox wise, CE is actually one of the best in the series. Like, you can use a lot of different weapons in the campaign and come out right. At the same time, CE is the one that drags for me the most, actually, which is that's the part that people might not like. People will definitely not like, actually, because something I really do like. I like fighting the Flood in CE quite a bit, mainly because the shotgun feels so fantastic. Which is why the library is actually my favourite mission in CE. Please don't hurt me, please. But it is. I don't know why. It's just maybe it's the Doom Eternal fan in me. I don't know. It's just fighting these endless hordes in these sort of tight spaces, and you always have shotgun ammo as well. It feels right to me. I really like that, and because you know there's a lot of aspects of CE that don't really quite work. Like the vehicle combat isn't quite there. You know, it still pioneered vehicle combat essentially in shooter games, and obviously it went on to get better. Like I said, I think 2 might actually have some of the best vehicle combat in the series, but it still pioneered that. I just think the vehicle stuff in CE is pretty ropey. Like the Scorpion feels pretty bad to use, to be honest. The Warthog also is very slidey. Ghost feels alright. The Ghost is actually one of the ones that pretty much always feels good. I mean, we'll talk about it. Infinite might actually have the best Ghost. You know, which is pretty interesting. You know, but CE obviously lacks a lot of things that, you know, like the brutes weren't going to be around in CE. That's just, they weren't. That's just how it is. But you know, CE drags for me in more ways than it hits. I find its story is, when you lay out its story, is very interesting, I think. But you know, then this might be a bias. You know, having started with a game like Reach feels so alive and like a much more complete game world. Whereas CE, you know, you're kind of meant. It should really be your first experience of Halo. I mean, it was when it came out, obviously, because it was the first game, and you know, and therefore no one really knew anything about Halo, and everything was a mystery, and that afforded it so much of what, you know, that afforded it the expectations that it needed for people to have a good time with CE. I think, unfortunately, my experience of actually having experienced majority of the games before CE, I played 3, I played ODST, I played 4, and I played Reach at least, maybe even 2 as well before playing CE. I also unfortunately played CE Anniversary first. Yeah. What can I say about CE? I think it's, for me, it is pretty far from a masterpiece. You know, pretty much all the levels drag for me at some point. I mean, Truth and Reconciliation is just, I kind of hate that level, actually. I like, you know, I like the first half, actually, or the first part, when you're not on the ship and you get the Under Cover of Night song. I mean, the soundtrack's just, you know, obviously it's fantastic. I didn't talk about Halo 2 soundtrack. Oh, fucking hell, Halo 2 soundtrack is the shit. It's not actually my favourite one, though. But, you know, still, C's got a great soundtrack. But it's like, yeah, for me, C has, I can't even say it's got a lot of issues. It just doesn't do a lot that I like, unfortunately. And it wasn't my in to the series, and I don't think it would have ever been my in to the series. I don't think if I played CE first, it would have got me hooked. I think Reach was probably the right starting point for me. Obviously, I was like, only about 10 years old when I played Reach. Actually, no, I was younger, about 7 years old when I played Reach. I don't think I would have got, you know, CE at the time. And, you know, this is a bias from me, but when I look at it, also when I do look at it objectively, I think CE, for me, I think it's the worst of the Bungie lot, unfortunately. I do think it's great in a lot of ways, and it's actually a good starting point, and I find it tonally, I do like it tonally, right? But the tone also drags a little bit, where I think sometimes I feel a little bit too lonely on this ring, you know? And I think that's something they addressed actually in Infinite with Echo or the pilot, but not in a way that I necessarily like either. So yeah, don't hurt me. I mean, I don't hate. I like CE. Right? I far from hate it, but for me, it's actually it is the worst of the Bungie lot, and I'd actually I've kind of had enough of it, and that's why I'm putting it in C. You know, I've played it maybe a dozen times, I think, and that's enough for me. It's really one of the ones that I don't want to play again all that much, despite how iconic it is. You know, yeah, C feels about right. I mean, when it comes to actually how I feel about Halo 2 and CE, they should probably be a bit closer. When it comes to how I actually feel, Halo 2 should probably be in B, but I can't really do that to Halo 2, unfortunately. But I can do that to CE. I know a lot of people agree that it's aged in some ways, and a lot of people point out things like, you know, the rocket launcher flood feel kind of unfair, and I do think Halo CE has some pretty awful checkpoints at times as well. I find myself getting frustrated with this game even on normal, which once again might just be me being shit, but most of my playthroughs of it have been on heroic difficulty. But yeah, I can't really back up this opinion too much, other than that CE just doesn't do enough that I'd like to really make me want to play it again. I will play it again, absolutely, but it's not something I look forward to, and I think that's why I got to put it as C. Unlike the next one, which I always look forward to playing, Halo 3. Halo 3 is just this... It was this cultural juggernaut, and it's still remembered in so many ways, right? You know, the main menu music, which I can never quite replicate, and I'm not going to try, actually, but it's just fantastic. I mean, the soundtrack is... The piano, like, the piano leitmotifs, like, the main menu music, the just what you hear while you're playing, it's like a sensory masterpiece in a lot of ways. It's a masterpiece in so many ways, except I guess character, because it's the thing with Halo 3. It's sort of this bombastic but also slightly somber thrill ride to the end, without very much character development. Halo 2 was the character development. Halo 3 was the finale, and it was meant to be. Halo 3 was meant to be the finale to Halo 2. Halo 3 just sort of is meant to just deliver on this epic tone. And it really does, you know. The cutscenes, they don't have a huge amount of character in them. It's actually, I think, more one-liners than discussions. But I think the imagery that's used, the way the music is used alongside it, I can't help but enjoy the story just so goddamn much, you know. And level design-wise, it's probably the best as well. It's this perfect combination to me of 2 and 1. You do have a lot of wide open spaces on things like the Covenant and the Ark, and you've got like these incredible, like visually, it's absolutely like for 2007, for 2007, sort of the locations, the visuals that you get when you're actually in game, what you can see, like when you're on the Ark, the things that you could see in game for a 2007 game, it's absolutely breathtaking. It's beautiful, right? And I think just the vehicle combat, the close quarters combat, the more open on-foot combat, it's all just the best it's ever been, frankly. And I love the tone of like there's a different tone to just about every mission, and I love it all. I think that, you know, it's just so so good. You know, Halo 3, you know, obviously I didn't play it in its golden age, but I still have a lot of nostalgia for it, and that's another thing. I don't have any nostalgia for CE or 2. Which is why they're ranked as low as they are. And you know, like when you say as low as they are, you might be thinking, oh, did he rank them at like, you know, D? Well, no, Halo 2's still in A, but you know, I think most people would put it in S. But Halo 3, my goodness, it's just, it's something else. It really is. And I mean, I don't know how best to describe it. I don't know how best to break it down on a more complex level. It's just, it's so right. For me, I absolutely love the tone. I love the level design. I just, the little stories that get told throughout the gameplay as well. It's just, I absolutely love it. Like in the first mission, when you have the brute like strangling the Marine, and you can choose to either save him or not. It's like things like that. It's like it feels so, you know, alive. I just absolutely adore Halo 3. It's like, I will say though, actually, one hit on Halo 3 that I will provide. The last two missions are probably its worst missions, unfortunately. Now, okay, Halo, as in the final mission of Halo 3, is awesome. That Warthog run is unrivaled. That's the shit, alright? But the first half of that mission I don't really enjoy, and also Cortana is a little bit of a drag. I've actually, I've come around a little bit to that mission, to Cortana, but at the same time, I do think those two missions are actually the worst that Halo 3 has to offer. But they're not bad enough to bring it down. I think Halo 3 belongs in S, unequivocally, and I know a lot, like I said, I think this might be one of the ones that one of the opinions that people are most okay with, but considering I haven't at least put Halo 3 and 2 in the same slot, or that I haven't put Halo 2 above Halo 3, that might annoy some people, which is fine. Right, so let's not waste any more time on Halo 3, because what it really boils down to is, it kind of is a flawed masterpiece, I think there's a lot of official storytelling flaws you can point out, but it sort of just transcends them in how just how it presents itself is just so unrivaled, frankly. It's just, and this is more opinion based than anything else. So based on my opinions, that's where it belongs. Oh, look who's next. The best one. Sorry. So Halo 3 ODST. So, what makes ODST so good? I don't know. See, this might draw some attention, but Halo 3 ODST is actually my favourite game ever. And this is where I was just talking about. This is based on my opinions, and this one is the most opinionated you're gonna get because it delivers on a tone that is very specifically tied to what I find aesthetically appealing. It's just, at the same time, though, I think it gets pretty much everything else right. I think, it having some extremely short levels is very odd, but I think to me, it has, the best soundtrack, the best atmosphere, and honestly, some of the tightest character work as well. You get a sense of who all of these people are in, what is actually the shortest game in the series, and I think that's really miraculous. And it ends rather unceremoniously, but it is meant to be sort of a somber ending. You're not meant to feel victorious, you're just meant to feel relieved that you made it out alive. There's no real victory in ODST, there's just survival, which is actually a really cool idea to me. That Reach is almost the other end of that, not the opposite of that. It's the other end of that in that you don't survive. But something about ODST where it's it's nowhere near as outwardly dark as something like Reach, but at the same time, it delivers so well in this extremely somber tone, and gameplay wise, you feel the tone come through. You sort of it sort of guides you into playing it like a stealth game, especially the Mombasa Streets levels where you play as the rookie, which I just think is so goddamn cool, and exploring the city and sort of going to these specific locations, finding the weapon caches and the audio logs, Sadie's story is so well presented. It's just every aspect of Halo 3 ODST appeals to me. I know it's not and I think to most people it definitely feels like a Halo game, but it's it features very few, basically no familiar characters, and it's entirely locked down to one location. And of course, CE is locked to one location as well, but ODST, you're on Earth the whole time in one city. And I suppose, setting-wise, that's not very Halo. And then again, neither is Reach in that same way. But ODST is just so... It's not necessarily what I'd say Halo means to me. But, it's what I think of when I think of Halo, because it's my favourite one. I know in a lot of ways it isn't the most Halo thing in the world. I guess Halo 3 is, or 2, I guess, 2. But I'm not going to deny how I feel about ODST. For me, it's an S tier game. I think for me, it gets literally everything right, and I love it to death. That's just the way it is. And I don't have all the time in the world, so let's move on to the Black Sheep, Halo 4. Black Sheep because well, actually Halo 4 and Halo 5 have this interesting dynamic where I think Halo 4's story is actually quite good, especially mainly from a character perspective. I think when you look at the actual lore involved in the narrative, it becomes a bit messy, a little bit like not nonsensical, but also unnecessary. A lot of the narrative elements feel very unnecessary, and the gameplay is pretty bad, and it's soured by this great disparity in sort of art style that you get going from the previous game to 4, or specifically from 3 to 4. And in a lot of ways, it definitely doesn't work for me. So overall, do I like 4? Yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, I actually enjoy most of my time playing 4, although I think it has better moments than overall levels in my opinion. Like actually, it's mainly just the Mantis in the Infinity, the 4th mission. It's mainly just that. It's also Halo 4 is, I wouldn't say annoyingly short. Maybe it's actually gratefully short in a lot of ways. But it's only 8 missions long. It's actually, I think it's the shortest in terms of the quantity out of all the games, which is definitely something to note. But where would I rank it though? I mean, it's like, it's so odd, and I think the Didact falls flat as a villain for me because you don't really get enough of him in the game. You know, like the audio logs in ODST, for example, they add a lot, but they're not essential to understanding the game. I think because they focus on a character that you don't actually meet. But the Didact sort of most of his character development, or his backstory, I should say, really being stored inside terminals, is a flaw in my opinion. I think Chief is written a little bit weirdly too. He's probably a little bit too emotional in this game. I think they got it much better in Halo Infinite. Cortana's design though, they got that right. Yeah, but also you do have Captain Lasky, who is a very cool supporting character. One of the most human feeling characters in the series for me. I really like Lasky actually. But level design wise, it doesn't really, shut down level 6. Yeah, you get to fly a pelican, like a combat pelican, but it's not an interesting level, if we're being honest. And then Infinity, it's kind of a cool level, but it also drags. Reclaimer, you get to escort the mammoth, but it's quite static. The first 3 missions I really don't like. Final mission is pretty cool. I think the opening's pretty cool. These extremely high future, high sci-fi Forerunner locations are actually come across pretty well, even though I think the design-wise are actually not what I prefer. I definitely prefer the way Bungie did Forerunner architecture. But, it still feels very sci-fi, and that you're flying a broadsword through a Forerunner ship on the move is actually really damn cool. But the rest of that mission is pretty piss poor, to be honest. And then you have Composer, Mission 7, which is actually very well designed, to be honest. Now, here's the difficulty that I face, and what I'm going to have to do to sort of make this right, not just so I don't get crucified, which I might already, but, just so it sits right with me. I'm going to have to move C up to B and put 4 at C, which I think is where it belongs. Like I said, 4 really has better moments to me than overall good elements, and I think really Composer is the only mission that I truly enjoy in 4. And story-wise, it's, I understand why people think it's good, but I can't say I actually enjoy it either. Yeah, in a lot of ways I actually want to put it down to D, to be honest, I guess you would ask the question which one would I rather play, 5 or 4, and I think I would probably say 4. But moving on to 5 though, because obviously I'm not going to delve into 5's story. The story is pretty shit. The writing is absolutely abysmal, right? But level design wise, 5 is genuinely quite good. I think some of the ones towards the end are not great. You know, you also have a great variety in locations as well, and some pretty cool characters. You know, actually, no, Locke's not that interesting, to be honest. Bringing Buck back was nice. I don't think he's done a total disservice. But overall, what really saves Halo 5 for me is the level design, and it's actually a game that but I still don't really enjoy playing it, or at least I don't enjoy playing it more than 4, because the story that surrounds it is just so sour to me that it doesn't actually make, like, it doesn't really make the good level design worth, you know, getting into and actually appreciating. That's why I'm sort of out on Halo 5. I think it's just going to go right and see. And it's also, frankly, I'd rather spend more time on the next 2. So we've got Reach, which is, like I said, it was my in to the series. It's the first one that I played, and Reach is, in my opinion, an actual masterpiece, right? Yeah, I do like ODST a little bit more, but Reach comes so close. Like, I absolutely adore Reach. Like, it does come down to tone a lot, and I think tone is really what draws me to these games in general. But it really does come down to tone and sort of just like, it's epic, but also very, very somber, but also kind of, you know, badass in, you know, like aesthetically. You've got the very militaristic sort of very militaristic look, probably the most rugged looking Halo game, you know. The personalities of Noble Team very, like, reflect that too. Like, George is this like gentle giant, but he's very like hard edged, and like you sort of have Emil, who's a bit of an edge lord too. But it's got this very militaristic vibe, and like it's a very rugged vibe. And the soundtrack is very harsh, very percussive. It's more percussion than anything. Like, the drums are awesome in this game, but you also got a lot of guitars as well. And I just think, for me, what really, like, you know, I think the level design is also pretty fantastic. It's got a good mix, to me, of, like, close quarters segments, more open vehicle-based segments, and also actually pretty good on-rail segments, which surprises me, because that's something that's really a staple of COD. Like, Halo doesn't really do on-rails, but you've got some stuff in Reach that's pretty good, like the Falcon section in Tip of the Spear. But what really does it for me is, you know, Reach almost feels like it has good cinematography while you're playing, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? It's like, it's such a beautiful game to me. It just looks absolutely incredible. Like, every frame is a painting. Like New Alexandria, you know, you sort of have to frame it yourself, like where you position the camera, but it doesn't fall short of beautiful. It's absolutely breathtaking, and like the cutscenes in Long Night of Solace are also absolutely stunning. I think it's the best shot Halo game. I think the cinematics, like sort of the style that they choose, it almost feels like they're using handheld cameras in a video game, and they also choose to show a lot through in-world cameras, which is a very good choice, and it makes it feel far more realistic, which really aids tone of the game. I just also, the characters of Noble Team, yeah, you don't spend a lot of time really getting to know them, but they're all so distinct, and that they really work, and it's really not about them. The game is really about the defense of, like, the hopeless defense of Reach. And despite how badass the game feels at times, it is ultimately a very somber, quite sad game. And, you know, everyone dies, except Jin. But everyone dies, and it's like, I mean, that ending is iconic for how sad it is, almost, you know. But for me, Reach, nothing short of an S tier game. Absolutely wonderful. Top tier. So, Infinite. Well, Infinite's campaign. So, when I first played it, I was, you know, it was a little bit of a honeymoon thing. You know, I was like, oh my god, the first new Halo game in, like, how long? And it was like, well, 5 years, I suppose. Or 6 years. 6 years, actually. It's like, oh, this is the shit. I mean, you know, it's like, it's so cool. The soundtrack is awesome. The guns feel amazing to use. The enemies feel amazing to fight. And, you know, I think my opinion was actually soured on the campaign once I realised how badly handled the game was as a product. And I sort of started to think, oh, maybe the story wasn't actually that good. Maybe the level design wasn't actually that good. But playing it again recently, no. Halo Infinite's campaign is awesome. I really, really love it. It's great. It's fantastic. I genuinely love Halo Infinite's campaign. I kind of want to play it again already. I think it feels amazing to move around in. I think Chief is written the best he's ever been written, actually. Which I know a lot of people would agree with me on. I think it's shot somewhat interestingly. They do this sort of one-take thing, though, with the camera. That I think does detract from what they could have done. They could have shot the cinematics more interestingly, but it's still a unique approach. And character-wise, I think it is quite good. I think the weapon is far less annoying than she could have been. I do find the pilot slightly annoying, though. But he works as an emotional like tether for Chief. For Chief to sort of be more emotional without seeming like he is like emotional. It's very difficult to describe, but I do think this is the best Chief has ever been written. It's also the best that he looks. I think Infinite looks fantastic. I think it's slightly visually flat, but that's mainly because there's very little variety in locations. I think the Banished are an awesome sort of antagonistic like force, and I think the game also has some really cool implications for the future that I really hope 343 gets their shit together and actually delivers a really cool like sequel to the campaign. Because knowing that Atriox is alive, that he's and that offensive bias is active, just the implications of that are awesome. And but in terms of pitfalls, I think the Harbinger is like sort of the main threat. Escharon's the main antagonist, but the Harbinger is sort of the main problem. Very weak villain, in my opinion. And also, I think they missed the trick that when it comes to sort of the weird hybrid open world / Lilia sort of level like game structure, they sort of stop themselves from being able to deliver on any like really cool set pieces. Like it seems almost infantile, and it is in a way, but the fact that you don't get to fight a Banished Scarab is actually a flaw in my book. But at the same time, Halo Infinite, despite how little like this is, you're only ever in one biome really, I still find the world very interesting to explore. I think it plays beautifully. I think it looks beautiful. And I really can't get enough of playing it. I just wish there was a little bit more going on. But I love the soundtrack. I love the actual, like, the linear missions I do find actually interesting. I think there's some interesting stuff going on. I don't know, I don't want to dwell too much on it because I will start repeating myself. But in my opinion, it's actually sort of an A tier. I think if I were to speak objectively, I do think Halo 2 probably is better. But I think I actually enjoy Infinite more. And that might be a dodgy opinion for a lot of people, but it's the way I feel, and I'm not going to hide it, so that's that. This is my Halo campaign tier list. I think there's probably a healthy balance here. I don't, it kind of sucks that you get sort of, 343's first 2 attempts down at the bottom, but for me, this is how it goes. These two were kind of blunders in a lot of ways. CE's great, but it's aged. 2 has a lot of issues for me personally, but I understand how good it actually is. Infinite is this really cool sort of return to form, but it's also different in a lot of ways that I think actually make it better, although it's still not perfect. And sort of these 3 are all very different. You've got the prequel, you've got the spin-off, you've got the finale, and they all represent to me the best of the series. And that's how it goes. I did end up sort of rushing a little bit, but at the same time, I didn't need to speak on 2 or CE for as long as I did. Either way, I just want to thank you all for watching, whether you're here because this is a Halo video, or you're here because you're just a Barrel Vision fan. Either way, thank you for being here, thank you for watching the video. I love you all, and if you enjoyed, and you're not subscribed, feel free to do so. I'm not going to beg you, but if you enjoyed this and you're not subscribed, it'll be wonderful. You can just ignore us in your subscription feed if you want. Either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.